Why can't you do it? So now you have to do it.
Ho ho, ha ha.
Actually, that was funny and that was scary.
Okay.
So it should be as that. So guys, we are talking about authentication. Data collector does 3 functions, guys, and one of them is load balancer, and second one is
Configuration and packaging
configuration and packaging, and third one is
Authentication.
is authentication for the client.
authentication.
For client.
What did you say?
Authentication of client.
Data collector doesn't do packaging. Why did you say packaging?
No, configuration and configuration and
Authentication
packaging.
of clients.
No, when we said data collector does
Yeah, we did
configuration.
say that it's storage of XenApp server stores XenApp configuration and packages.
But that is data store. I'm talking about data collector. Okay. One more time.
Yeah, it's okay.
Data collector does
But-
load balancing.
But
Number
that's what we
one.
said, data collector.
Data collector does load balancing. Data store does stores the packaging
hasn't told us
and it
what's
stores
the third role it
configuration
does.
and packaging. Data store,
He
not the
hasn't
data
told me.
collector.
He hasn't told us the third thing it does.
Yes, I haven't said this. So look at this, guys. So first, data
Load
collector.
balancer.
Data collector does load balancing. Number one. Number two, data collector helps in authentication.
So you went data store, database before then the data collect. That's what
It
got
was the
confused.
time when you were looking at your cell phone. When we shifted, when I said no, I'm gonna explain this first, and then so.
How does it help to authenticate?
Yes, so this is what I'm gonna explain. Guys, first of all, why authentication? Guys, authentication is basically authentication these guys. Exactly the way when you go to a bank, so when we go to a TD bank, and you go into a line and you go to a teller machine, what is the first thing they do? What is the first thing they
Debit
do when
card.
you reach to a teller machine?
They say hi,
They
how are
ask
you?
you the authentication. They ask you to do authentication. And how are they doing the authentication? ATM card and PIN number. Because if they don't do authenticate, why are they doing it? Because they are only going to open an account for a person that who is eligible to see the account.
And you have a transaction up to 1,000, then you have a like ID.
No,
Do you have any idea?
no,
Yeah?
no, 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 no.
Unfortunately, we never made it, so we don't. know.
Actually, you're gonna make it. So let's look at this. Let's look at this here. Let's look at this. So guys, here, authentication, data collector helps in authentication. What does it do basically? As soon as, guys, now the concept of authentication, data collector. As soon as this user comes to web interface and says, I need to use Word application, and before the Word application is open for this, data collector, what it does, it goes to a DC. It goes to a domain controller. So it goes to a domain controller and says that, you know what, I have person Mike, can you please authenticate this? So basically this is done by data collector. Data collector takes the username Mike and send it to Active Directory. If Mike is an authenticated user of your environment, then only the application will be given to a user.
So that also
So that
means
is what it does. It takes the username and bring it to a domain controller and says, I have this person trying to access XenApp application, please authenticate.
So we have two DC here.
So this
Domain
is a
controller.
DC, a data collector of XenApp server, whereas this is a DC or a domain controller of Active
So
Directory.
mainly,
so it means that there's a group policy also involved in there, right? There's a group policy involved in there,
Where?
and that ADDS. There's a
There is
group
a group
policy.
policy?
Yeah,
No, there is no group policy involved in this.
that what the user needs to be have that
And this
particular.
is actually this is done internally between data collector and domain controller.
No, so
No
let's
group
say-
policy. There is no group policy.
No, but you're saying that, but obviously you have to, it's not like every application will be, everyone will be able to access it, right? But there should be, there would be some authentication, okay, there's authentication, but how they know that, okay, that's a particular application will be only for Mike, not
Yes,
for everybody.
Exactly. So that is all done when you're packaging. So when we do the packaging, at that point we'll say this application will be accessed by Gary and this application will be accessed by him. And that is all decided based on Citrix configuration, not based on group policy.
So what's the AD does then? What's
So
the,
AD will just check that if this user's username and password
is
is
a part
correct.
of, is a part of
Part
it?
of our domain.
Domain, okay.
Yes, that it is just going to check this.
Okay, so you just check the mic as authentication for that if it is a
Exactly.
member
It
of
is just
domain.
making sure that Mike is a legit member of your Active Directory.
Then its DC comes apart.
And then what it does, data collector helps in authentication.
Yeah.
It takes the username password of Mike
Yeah.
and send it to Active Directory. Active Directory says, oh yes, the username password is correct.
Yeah.
And then will give that. Now, what if
Got it.
Mike is not a member of your Active Directory? So it logs in and sends their credentials here, and Active Directory says, no, I don't know Mike. Or maybe password is expired. Maybe Mike is disabled.
Yeah.
At that point, application will not be given to Mike, and Mike will get a error saying that you have no access to this application.
Go home.
So guys, data collector does two functions. One is load balancer, second is helps in authentication. Guys, the third important function of data collector is, which one? Third important function of data collector is, and that is it owns a dynamic database of Citrix. It owns data collector owns a dynamic data collector owns a dynamic database of Citrix. So dynamic database of Citrix. So data collector has a small database that has a dynamic information of Citrix. Data collector has a small database inside. Now that means Citrix environment has two databases. One database is known as data store, and second database is known as data collector. Data collector owns a dynamic database. This owns a static database, this owns a dynamic. Guys, the word here is dynamic information. Now, why would somebody need a dynamic information? Guys, being a data collector, let's say I am a data collector. Let's say have you ever been to a trucking company? So you've been to in trucking company there is somebody called who sends out the load and everything? In trucking company. Dispatcher, guys. So basically this is acting as a dispatcher. What is a dispatcher? What does dispatcher have to have?
It gives a load to.
Dispatcher needs to have, in order to give you a load, dispatcher needs to have your information as well. Thinking that let's say you are all of the trucks, and as a dispatcher I need to know if you are free or you're on duty.
You're off duty or not on duty.
You're off duty or on duty. If you're off duty, then I can give you work. If you're on duty, then I won't give you work. So this is
No, if you're off duty, then cannot give you work.
Yes, if you're off duty, then we can give you work. If you're on duty, then we cannot give you. Now, this is known as dynamic information. Why is it called dynamic information? Because checking that, because you're on duty or off duty is random. Sometimes you're on duty, sometimes you're off duty. This is known as a dynamic information, as compared to static information, which is, let's say, this database owns all static configuration. For example, how many Citrix servers you have. So if you have 3 Citrix servers, it's not changing every day. So if you have 3 Citrix servers, there'll be 3 Citrix servers. But data collector will have information that how much load is there on this server. So let's say at 10 a.m. this had 20 users, and this has 25 users, 55 users. And then after 1 hour, let's say now there are 15 users and there are 45. So this is a dynamic information. And data collector must have this information in order to do load balancing. Just like a dispatcher. Dispatcher needs to know that how much load is given to how many people and how many people are free. So dispatcher needs to have that dynamic. So this is what that dynamic information is. Since data collector is a load balancer, and that load balancer needs to know that how loaded these servers are. And load is supposed to change every minute. So every minute some users are connecting, other users are disconnecting. Sometimes this server CPU is high, sometimes it is low. So data collector stores all that dynamic information. That which servers are busy and which servers are less busy, so I can send that load to them. And now, where is that information stored? That information is stored in our data collector. Now, just to summarize this, Citrix
Could you just explain the dynamic one? Sorry. I
Yes,
didn't-
I'm going to explain that one more time. So Citrix, so here we're going to say Citrix. Citrix, when it comes to databases, it has two types of databases. I'm going to come back to these. So Citrix databases, Citrix has two types of databases. One is known as data store, and the other one is known as data collector. Both are databases. So both are, this is a database and this is a database too. But data store is a static database. This holds static Citrix configuration. Whereas this one, it holds or stores, actually instead of holds, stores Citrix dynamic, Citrix environment, dynamic information. Citrix environment dynamic. So if somebody asks how many databases are there in Citrix, there are two types of databases. One is data store and the other one is data collector, which is right here. So you have data collector and data store. So data store, so the one data store, it stores the static information. Now what is static information? Static information is simply number of Citrix servers, number two, number of web interface, how many web interface servers you have, number three, licenses, number four, zones or sites, and etc. Now this is a Citrix environment information, that how many Citrix servers are there, Citrix web interface servers are there, how many licenses, how many zones and sites are there. Whereas dynamic information is right here. Dynamic information is basically dynamic information. Dynamic information is basically load on Citrix servers. So this is load on Citrix servers. Number two, connections, user connections, etc. Inside this data store. Now, that will be, let's say it's a blueprint of your building. It's a blueprint of, before you making a home or anything, you make that blueprint, and that blueprint has what is the measurement of rooms, where is the electricity box and all that. Basically this is done. So the measurement of rooms and that architecture, does that change every day?
Yeah.
No, at home, can you change every day your room construction?
No.
You can't, right? You still have to go back to the city, get approval and add more rooms if you ever need to do it, right? So Citrix main configuration information all stored in data store, but every day-to-day load balancing information is all stored in data collector. So that is what is known as the data collector holds the dynamic information. Data collector holds dynamic information. And it's a small database. Because data collector acts as a dispatcher. It receives a request, send it to one XenApp server. And for that it needs to have this load information. Which servers are more loaded, which servers are less loaded. So that is why it is known as, that is why I used the word that has a dynamic information and data store has a static information.
That's right.
Okay. So it's not difficult to understand. So data store. Now, the last component that we need to understand is known as licensing server. So that is known as licensing server. So how many components are there? So one is XenApp server. One is XenApp server. Second is web interface server. Third is data store, which is the main database of Citrix environment. Fourth is data collector.
Data
data
collector,
collector.
yeah.
And
Data
this data collector has three functions. One is that it is a load balancer, number one. Number two, it helps in authentication.
Of
Number two.
client.
And number three, it holds a dynamic information. So the C part is holds dynamic information. Guys, again, one more time, these are the keywords that are required in interviews. If you understand them, if you're able to explain it to another person that these are the components and this is how it works, this is how you know Citrix from the root level. If your root are very strong, on top you can make anything. You can understand any bigger Citrix environment, but this has to be 100% clear. Question.
Just the third one, that data collector owns a dynamic database of that.
I just explained it.
No, like for that I didn't get it. Like dynamic
I
mean
need
to
get
from
that
there.
Question. What is your question?
No, the question is that how that you have explained it, but I didn't properly get it. What do you mean by?
Because your brain was moving everywhere.
No, I was
because
here.
I went out. It's my mistake.
No, it was there.
And then you went out too.
So it's your mistake as well.
Yeah, my mistake as well.
Okay. So can you explain the difference between the databases?
Yes.
Try explaining that. Try.
Sure.
Okay.
The-
So now he will be explaining dynamic information, but in order to understand dynamic information, you must understand what is static information. Okay?
Okay, so data store.
So Citrix databases are of two types.
Citrix database are of two types. One is data store, which stores all the static database, which is mainly the all the database, which usually doesn't change often. For example, the Citrix number of Citrix servers, number of web interface, licenses, and zones inside. For example, when you build a house, you make a blueprint, right? That this room will be of this size. It will have these many doors. It doesn't change frequently. And on the other hand, data collectors has all that database which usually change rapidly. For example, number of users coming in, logging out.
Yes.
Yeah. So anything which are
track of all
okay, yeah.
operations.
For example, how many people are coming inside your room or how many people are going out of your room.
Exactly. That is
So-
dynamic information.
Yeah, which is frequently changing, constantly changing. For example, the size of this room will stay constant.
Stay the same.
Stays the same.
But the number of
every
people
day,
coming in and going out.
Yeah.
Guys, bravo. Give it a hand. Excellent. Good understanding and good.
Stand up, you know.
Uh-huh.
Stand up and have a coffee from Qadar.
Okay. So now going back to
Did
your
you got
question. Yes. So since we do understand.
No, I mean to say that what kind of information they are talking about on that case we are talking
Yes,
about. Like
so the
is
load
that
information.
load information about what the
How
users.
many users
Exactly.
are
The,
taking the package from this server?
Yes. So how many users are on this so that next time when a new user will come, data collector has to decide, should I use this server to give that application or should I use this server? If this server is less busy, let me give application from this server. So that information, like number of users, number of user connection, that is called dynamic information, and that is inside a data collector. Okay?
got it.
So now we know of 4 components of XenApp environment. First one was XenApp server. And XenApp server, what is the main purpose of XenApp server?
Just to
It
hold
hosts
application and
packaging.
packaging.
It's the factory area. Second one is
Web interface.
Web interface is the front end
Giving
of
access
your
to the
Citrix
users.
environment where people go and connect and then access their application. Third is data store. That is the main Citrix. That is the main Citrix configuration, where the main Citrix configuration is. And data collector has 3 functions. 3. So first one is
Load
balancer.
I
balancer.
can get everyone.
Load balancing.
Second one helps in
Authentication.
Third one
Dynamic database.
information. Guys, the next important component is, so 1, 2, 3, and 5 is license server. So fifth one is license server. And this is it is explaining itself. So license server is the server that holds all the licenses of Citrix server. So holds all Citrix licenses. Hold all Citrix licenses. If Citrix license server is down, server cannot work. Your Citrix environment cannot work. And these license servers are very strong servers. Unlike Microsoft, if your Windows license is down, you can still work with Windows Server. right? But as soon as this server says that Citrix license has expired, at the same time, all Citrix component will stop working. Okay?
Right.
So this server is a server that holds the license of your environment, and it's a separate full-fledged component. They made it full-fledged component. Now, so this is a license server. Now, worker groups, worker group is not a main component. Without even worker group, your server can still work. But worker groups are just collection or group of Citrix servers, XenApp servers. We make a worker group of XenApp server, and then it's not a major component. I don't know why they added it here in the slide. It's just a
Citrix
group
license.
of XenApp servers. It's a group of XenApp servers. Worker group is a group of XenApp servers. But it's not a main component. If you don't have a worker group, your environment will still work. But all of the other components, without XenApp, sorry?
We need to have all other components.
Yes, all other components are must. Worker group is not must. Worker group is just a sub-component. Worker group, you can just write one word for worker group, a group of XenApp servers. You can group XenApp servers for maybe many different reasons. So here I'm going to say worker group.
So we're going through that canal now.
Hmm?
We're going through the canal
Yay,
now.
fun job.
Yeah.
Fun job. So here worker group. Worker group is group of
XenApp
servers.
server.
Now, why would you need to group them? Let's say I want to group all the servers that holds maybe your financial information, financial application. You have a financial application. You have a XenApp server that has a financial application. It has financial application. Now, what is the main purpose of a XenApp server? XenApp server actually holds applications and packages. Now, this XenApp server is holding a financial app. And this financial app is accessed by 100,000 users, 1 lakh users. So let's say this application needs to be accessed by 1 lakh users or 100,000 users. Okay? How many users? 100,000 users.
1 lakh.
Now when 100,000 users are accessing on one, guys, what are we understanding? Sohail, what are we understanding? We are understanding what is a worker group. Worker group is a group of XenApp servers. Now, where can we use worker group? Where can we use worker group? Worker groups are used when you need to group one server for one specific task. When you need to group. So I'm giving you an example to understand worker group. Worker group, let's say an application, a financial application, or maybe a hospital application, or maybe a customs application on airports. That application is accessed by 100,000 users. But if 100,000 users are accessing Sohail, if 100,000 users are accessing,
Accessing me, sir?
accessing, but you're not
You want me to
accessible.
blast?
You're not accessible. You're somewhere else. So here, look at this. So if 100,000 users are accessing application from one server, this one server will be very slow. So in this case, for those applications that are accessed by a huge number of users, what we do is we create more XenApp servers and host one application in 3 servers and then make a group of these servers. Now, why are we making a worker group? I'm saying this is a worker group of my financial application. Why? Because this application is being accessed by 100,000 people. So instead of being accessed on one server, it can be accessed from any 3 servers. So basically, worker groups are a group of servers that are doing exactly same task at the same time. Okay? You can say it's a group of servers you're making. It's again example of tellers. The banks that are busy, you will see many tellers there. The banks that are not busy, the bank, let's say TD Bank. A small bank can have how many tellers? Maybe 2 tellers, right? 2 tellers.
Yeah.
And that bank might not have a business area. They're not offering business services. So in some banks where you go, they don't have that special counter for business services. But in some branches, you go, there will be 7 normal tellers and then there will be 2 especially for business services, right? So basically they made a worker group of tellers who are specially for business services. So this is exactly what happens in real environments, that you create a worker group only when it is required. Normally, worker groups are not required. You can just make one XenApp server, it will start working on its own. Then you add another XenApp server, then your environment gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So guys, today we are discussing the main components of XenApp server. In XenApp server, what we did.
For the slides.
Okay. So in XenApp server, what we did, what we did, we went through basic definition. What is the basic definition? So basic definition is
Application virtualization.
Application virtualization platform
virtualization.
where we utilize any applications and provide to users over the network. So basically, you are having applications, and you take that application, you package it, and then give it to the users. Secondly, we went through this example that applications can be given to a user in two ways. How many ways?
Two ways.
Two ways. What is the first way?
Manual.
Manual way.
Manual.
What is the manual way? You just take that application, install on all these machines. Or the second way is through Citrix. So we bring that application to a Citrix server, and what do we have to do? Bring that application, package it, and then
Load it.
and then load it to a web interface server, and from where users will access web interface, and from they access. So is the application given to the user for good?
No.
No.
No. Just loaned that app temporarily. It is given to you so that you can use that application. Once you're done, you'll
Bring
give
it
it back to
back,
me. This is what Citrix does. Now, Citrix has, and Citrix comes in 3 different versions. How many versions? 3 different versions. What is the first one?
Advanced.
Advanced. I can't hear you guys. Advanced. Numan, I can't hear you.
Advanced.
Second one?
Enterprise.
Third one?
Platinum.
Platinum. Are you making him busy?
No, I'm sending this one.
Oh, okay.
There you go. You just got it.
Okay, good. So three versions. And how many versions of, so these are types of Citrix, and it came as 3.x, 4.x, 4.5 was a significant one. It was upgraded to version 5, and version 5 was upgraded to 6, 6 is upgraded to 6.5. In 6.5 they did many things, and 6.5 is the more stable version at this point. Many people are using it. It is upgraded to 7.1, 7.6, 7.9, and I am expecting maybe there is another version very soon. There is another version coming very soon. But here Citrix. So then, how many components of Citrix? 5 components. There are 5 important components of Citrix. At least 6 components. 6 components. So, but 5 components are mandatory. The 6th one is not mandatory. So first one is
XenApp server.
XenApp
server.
So first one is
XenApp server.
XenApp server. What is the main function? Host application and package application.
Package application.
So basically, in real world, this is the factory area where you're making, packaging everything. If your factory area is down, then you cannot make anything. Okay. Second one, it's a production
Web
area. Right?
interface.
It is office is actually the web interface. So we go to the office, but the factory area is industrial. So second one is web interface. Yes, web interface is good. It is an office. So here it's a website for users to access application. Third one is data store. Data store, it's a database, and what does it do? It is the storage area of XenApp server. It stores XenApp configuration
And packages.
And packages. It stores all static information. And the third and fourth one is, what is the fourth one?
Data collector.
Data
Data collector.
collector. It is a
Data collector.
Load
data
balancer.
collector. Why can't I hear you? Please, we have to. You're sleeping.
No,
He's
I'm
sleeping in the
not
Almost
Citrix.
sleeping.
No.
No,
Almost.
I'm not sleeping. I will
Okay.
tell you.
Okay,
Ca-
so
can-
data collector.
Can I ask you one question?
Yes.
Okay. In XenApp server, when we are trying to package an application, it's storing in data store, right?
Hmm?
When an application is being packaged,
Yes, it
it
stores in
in data store.
Exactly. It stores in. So whatever you create new in XenApp, it is stored in a static data store. And whatever is being connected, disconnected, people are coming into room, going out, different classes, timing, schedule, everything goes into data collector. Now here, so then the next one is data collector. It has 3 functions.
Load balancer.
So first of all, it is a
Load balancer.
Load balancer.
Second one, it helps in
Authentication.
And the third one is
Dynamic
and
dynamic information. Citrix has how many types of databases?
Two.
How many types of data?
Two.
Two.
Store and
Yes, two. It is
Yes,
two types
two.
of data.
Data store and data collector.
Okay, so it has so Citrix databases are of how many types?
Two.
Two types of databases.
Static.
And what is the first one?
Static.
Data store. Second one
Dynamic.
is
Dynamic.
Data collector is dynamic. This is static information. And static information meaning
Static.
in real world you can call this as the blueprint of your building. It's the architecture of your building that is not changing every day. Whereas this is a load information, how loaded your servers are and all that. And then we have
License.
license server. Without licensing, Citrix will not work. Citrix will not work without licensing, and license server is very, very important. Next, last one is worker group. Worker groups are just group of servers for a specific task. So they're doing group of servers with a specific
So
task.
Citrix database is also like part of those 5 components. It's the same thing, right?
Citrix database.
Like Citrix database actually the part of the
It is
5
this one.
component, and
Yeah.
those are just the actually the
More explanation.
More explanation
That is just
on that.
more explanation. Basically, this is just explanation. Actually, components are this: 1, 2, 3, 4,
Yeah.
5.
yes.
5 and 6. Okay, so what I want you to do, guys, same description. I want you to discuss in a group of 2, in a group of 2, in a pair of 2. So the person sitting on my right, person sitting on my right is listening. Person sitting on my left is explaining.
Yes.
Not person sitting on my left is explaining. Person sitting on my right is listening. Okay. So start now, guys. One rule for this discussion is honesty. Honesty to say each and every word on the board, guys. It's not a test. Don't be
Sir, we're gonna make a group of 3.
Yes, group of 3, and each and every person go through one component. Guys, this is the time you paid for.
Speaking, we'll
This is the time you paid for. So have a good time spent and